Okay, everybody, welcome to the West Theater panel session. Will artificial intelligence change naval warfare? And are we ready if it does? Thanks, everybody, for coming. And before we get started, I'd like to thank our sponsor, Steampunk, and call Nick Trzynski, Senior Vice President, DoD Sector, and Sean Dillon, Chief Technology Officer, to the stage. Hello, guys.
Thank you so much. Thank you. Good morning, everybody. Welcome to Day 2 at West. My name is Nick Trzynski. I lead the defense sector for Steampunk, and this is our CTO, Sean Dillon. We're so proud to be a sponsor at West this year for a number of reasons, but most importantly to us, to punctuate our entry into this defense sector market as a positively disruptive presence. Hopefully the bullet bottle openers won't be too disruptive at TSA, but jury's out. As a former naval officer, when I found out that Sean here was a Marine, I knew I joined the right team. I knew he'd take care of me. But I also knew I'd found something exciting. As I mentioned, Steampunk's a brand new firm. We're dedicated to bringing technological capability in cybersecurity, DevSecOps, including advanced cloud rapid development activities, data exploitation, and digital platforms, implementations like Salesforce and others, but with a very important distinction, which is an emphasis on a human-centered design approach that we like to call Steampunk Design Intelligence. Increasingly, the barrier to bringing advanced capability to the fleet and fleet Marine Force is not technological. The tools exist. They're great. They're getting better every day. The barriers are those inadvertently created when we fail to put sailors and Marines at the center of the process. We love that this approach has been embraced by shops like NavalX with their warfighter-centered design concept, and rapid delivery capability organizations like SOFWorks and AFWorks and NavalX. This is a double celebration for Steampunk, since we're elated to not only showcase our new brand here at the West Theater, but also celebrate our selection on the SBIR vehicle through AFWorks to support Kubernetes containerization activities on the Joint Strike Fighter program. So with that, I'm very excited to listen to the panel. Thank you so much for joining us. We're a proud sponsor here at West and the presentations of the West Theater. So let's enjoy the AI panel today, and please look for us here out on the floor. Let's design, disrupt, and repeat together. Thank you.
Thanks, guys. I'm Ward Carroll from the Naval Institute. I'm Director of Outreach and Marketing, and also the co-host of the Naval Institute podcast, which we'll be doing episodes from the booth this afternoon. And it's my pleasure to introduce my good friend, Captain George Galdorisi, U.S. Navy retired. So George has a very distinguished career both as a helicopter pilot, naval officer at the senior levels, and as a writer, both fiction and nonfiction. He made his mark as a LAMPS Mark III pilot in WW Cold War, and we won that one, remember that. Then he was skipper of HSL 43 and then the RAG HSL 41. He went on to command the Cleveland LPD 7, and then he spent 5 years as the chief of staff for Crew Desgru 3 aboard Vinson and Lincoln, and during that he did a lot of face-to-face with the Chinese Navy, which was sort of the highlight of that tour. On the writing side, he's done the Rick Holden series, which was published by Brave Ship, and then he also did the Tom Clancy Op Center series, and then with former SEAL Dick Couch, he wrote the New York Times bestseller Tom Clancy Presents Act of Valor. Currently, he is supporting his Naval Institute Press book, The Kissing Sailor, which proved the identity of the two principals in the Einstadt famous photograph. He's award-winning. He's received literary awards from Navy League and NHA and also the Surface Navy Association. So please let me turn it over to Captain Galdorisi. George.
So, Ward, thanks for that far too kind introduction. I'm not sure everyone here believes everything you said, but if my mother were alive, she'd love to hear it all. So thanks. So on behalf of our panel, we really would like to thank the Naval Institute and AFCEA for allowing us to share our views, and we'd especially like to thank April Perico and Kelly Alto for all the hard work they did behind the scenes, thankless work to make this panel actually happen. So, as Ward mentioned, the title of the panel, the subject of the panel is Will Artificial Intelligence Change Naval Warfare? And if it does, are we ready for it? So why are we talking about this subject? I think you read the little bit of a summary in the program, so I won't go over that, but what our panel is going to try to do is examine the challenges and opportunities that AI presents in the military context, and it features several panelists here who are authors for the forthcoming Naval Institute book, AI at War, How Big Data, Artificial Intelligence, and Machine Learning Will Change Naval Warfare. There are good and sufficient reasons why we should talk about AI and machine learning, but I think the primary reason goes to the theme of this conference: are we ready to confront great power competition? In that context, it's worth noting that our adversaries, our peer adversaries, are galloping ahead with AI and machine learning investments. You've heard the statements, no doubt, from leaders in Russia and China, and they are not kidding. They are making huge investments. Here's what the DoD and Department of the Navy leadership is saying. In congressional testimony, our Secretary of Defense, Michael Esper, said, "I think artificial intelligence will likely change the character of warfare. It's a fundamental game changer, and we need to get there first." Our Chief of Naval Operations and Commandant of the Marine Corps have said similar things in their congressional testimony. These are all good aspirations, but as the director of the Joint Artificial Intelligence Center, General Shanahan, said at a recent visit to the War College where he was hosted by Dr. Tangredi, Big Navy is, in my opinion, still sorting through how they will get organized for AI. So part of the purpose of our panel is to explain how we think the Navy is getting organized for AI. We'll hear from our three panelists, and then we'll open up the floor for questions from you all, because I'm pretty sure that's why most of you are here. So we've got on our panel Dr. Jamie Lukos to my immediate left. She's with NIWC Pacific. We've got Commander Connor McLemore with the Navy staff, N81, and my good friend and colleague, Dr. Sam Tancredi, who is with the Naval War College Institute for Future Warfare Studies. So first we'll hear from Dr. Lukos. Dr. Jamie Lukos is a research scientist and branch head at NIWC Pacific in the Basic and Applied Research Division. She received her Ph.D. from Arizona State University, and she worked with human decision-making there. A fun fact about Dr. Lukos is that she played defensive tackle on our Pee Wee football team. So please join me in welcoming Dr. Jamie Lukos.
All right. Thank you, George. Can you guys hear me? All right, cool. All right. So my background is in neuroscience, which is a little different for an AI panel, but I really appreciate the fact that Steampunk already validated my presence on this panel by saying how important human-centric engineering is to AI. So that's one of my kind of primary soapboxes, I would say. In order for AI to truly make a difference both in the commercial sector and for our warfighters, we really need to focus on human sensing. So we do a pretty good job right now of being able to sense our platforms in very complex settings. Our robots have plenty of sensors, but we really don't do a great job of measuring our most important and our most dynamic systems, which are our people in the field. And the problem with that is that when we talk about human-machine teaming, a team represents bidirectional communication. And right now, we kind of receive a lot of information from our systems, but our systems don't really receive a lot of information or input from us. And when they do receive input, it's usually a button press or something that typically represents a solution rather than an uncertainty. But when we talk about a team, it's usually a discussion. We don't have a discussion right now. So what my group and some of the other collaborators that we work with in human sciences, what we're trying to do is kind of measure and be able to project human intent. So that's one of the major things that we believe is missing in order for AI to truly make a difference in this world. Let me see. I have a couple other soapboxes. Hold on. I wrote them down. Okay. Secondly, AI as the ultimate savior. So this is one of my other issues that I have with the way we treat AI right now. It's kind of thought of as this this tangible object that is going to come and going to fix all of our problems miraculously. We'll put it in a black box, and out will come the answer, and we don't have to worry about all of the implications and all of the uncertainty associated with that. So I think that's something we need to be careful with as we transition into this world of AI, making sure we're not overhyping a lot of the products that we're putting out there, making sure we understand the limitations, and being accepting of our lack of understanding. So it's not going to be the perfect solution to everything, and we can't treat it that way. Similarly, we can't expect in any teaming situation that our teammate is going to be perfect, right? But we have this sort of mindset that AI or unmanned systems, they're going to be integrated into our team instantly and have all these expectations and be able to function. But that's not how team dynamics work. Team dynamics take time. So we have to, over time, learn what our systems are able to do and learn how to adapt to them, just as we are asking in AI and machine learning for those systems to adapt to us. So again, it has to be sort of a holistic team representation. I think I will stop there as to not to take up too much time. But in terms of your question, are we ready or not? Or are we ready? I think the real answer is ready or not. AI is coming, so let's figure out how to do it.
Okay, thank you, JB. Next up is Lieutenant Commander Connor McLemore, who's Principal Operations Research Analyst and Section Head at the Office of Chief of Naval Operations, N81. Commander McLemore is a naval aviator who serves in the E-2 Hawkeye community. He's a graduate of the United States Navy Top Gun School. A fun fact about Commander McLemore is that Roger Clemens, winner of 7 Cy Young Awards, hit him with a golf ball at the American Century Celebrity Golf Tournament in Tahoe. So please join me in welcoming Commander McLemore.
All right, thank you, sir. Can everybody hear me? Is that good? Okay. And yeah, it really hurt when I got hit with the golf ball. I'd just like to take some time to talk about why I'm here talking to you. So, wearing a flight jacket, I'm a E2C Hawkeye NFO by background. So what am I doing up here on a panel about AI, and what am I doing talking about AI? Well, artificial intelligence is not an abstraction to me. So going back to my JO tour in a squadron, my first cruise was on USS Constellation. So let me bring you back to March 20th, 2003 at the kickoff of Operation Iraqi Freedom. So we were the night carrier at the time. There were 3 carriers in the Gulf, and the war kicked off. And at the time, the Hawkeyes had been assigned to maritime patrol in the Gulf. So if you don't know what the Hawkeye is, it's the one with the twin-engine turboprop with the dome on it, command and control aircraft, a lot of sensors and communication systems and that sort of thing. So we had been assigned to maritime patrol in the Gulf, which was a gentle way of saying, stay out of the way, I think, right? And what ended up happening was by almost immediately, a whole lot of aircraft started coming back to the carrier with bombs on their wings, and I can assure you it was not for a lack of targets at the time. And what was happening was the air war had actually outpaced the ability of the unit that does the asset mission assignment for dynamic targets called the Air Support Operations Center, which is a bunch of Humvees that were stuck back in Kuwait. The air war had actually outpaced the speed of those Humvees, which were back in Kuwait, and nobody could get targets. So we hadn't trained to this mission, and we were told to get in there and fix it. So we were flying on day 3, 100 miles south of Baghdad, and we were doing the best we could, right? We were making it happen. We were passing paper back and forth. and we were using grease pencils. And we had an aircraft checking in roughly every 15 seconds, and we had a target coming in roughly every minute. So you can imagine, and that was for the entire western half of Iraq. We were doing the dynamic pairing. And so we made it happen, and fortunately, the Iraqi military, as far as their ability to affect the air war, wasn't very good, and so we were able to make it happen, but not very well, and that's because command and control doesn't scale. So I think if you look at it objectively, you want software for command and control, and we didn't have it. So when we got back to Point Mugu, I figured I'd reach out to all these organizations that are actually responsible for doing this mission, and they said, "Oh no, we don't have software for that. We use grease pencils and we pass paper back and forth," and that to me was just unbelievable. So a few years later, I got an opportunity to go to the Naval Postgraduate School, get a degree in operations research, and I was able to do my thesis on automated asset mission assignment. And then I got an opportunity to go back there to teach in the OR department, and I got to advance that work even further while I was there. And then coming to 81, I got assign to a artificial intelligence cross-functional team. This was when I first showed up, so probably 2.5 years ago. And I just wasn't I wasn't happy with the quality of the conversation in the Pentagon. And that's not because these aren't smart people working on this stuff. Nobody had really, I think nobody really understood what the Navy's specific problems in this field were. So I wrote some articles, I did some stuff, and I think that, I don't know if it has anything to do with that, but certainly I can tell you that the quality of conversation on artificial intelligence within the Pentagon, as far as what the actual hard problems are, has improved greatly over the 3 years that I've been in the building, and that's very heartening. So I look forward to this discussion, and that's I think all I have for now.
Okay, thank you, Connor. Finally, we'll hear from Dr. Sam Tancredi. Dr. Tangredi is the Leidos Chair of Future Warfare Studies at the Naval War College. Prior to his career as a Navy civilian, he served as a surface warfare officer, including Command at Sea. He's a prolific author with 5 books and over 150 journal articles to his credit. And not to make him blush, he's the lead editor for our USNI Press book, AI at War, where he brought together 20 chapters and over 30 authors. A fun fact about Dr. Tangredi is that he's writing a comic book about Admiral Alfred Thayer Mahan, making him into a superhero. So please join me in welcoming Dr. Tangredi.
Thanks, George. You just swelled my head. I'm going to talk about something that is not talked about within the AI community very often, and that's deception. Now, you hear Secretary Esper say that AI is going to change the character of war, and my argument, no, it's not. It's going to change how we apply weapon systems and how we make decisions, but we're still going to get into that situation where the enemy is going to try to deceive our systems in a variety of ways, and we're going to try to deceive their systems, and we're going to go back and forth on that. So if I were advising industry, someone who wanted to start up a company in the software or AI field, I would say to market yourself, don't market yourself as just an AI company. Market yourself as a company that's going to focus on how to prevent someone from sticking that yellow tab on the red stop sign so that the autonomous car does not stop at that stop sign. Be a company that focuses on how to prevent the enemy from changing the pixelation of various photos for photo recognition and spoofing us into thinking that, as I think recently there was a company that said that they were doing recognition and they got a Bichon Frise dog and an ostrich confused and that sort of thing. AI is a good tool. It's a tool in the toolkit. It will help very much the successors of Connor do their operating. But it is a tool. It's not going to be a It's not a condiment. You can't just sprinkle it around. It's not going to win the war for you. It's going to be a very useful tool. And that contrasts with a lot of the ways that AI has been talked about. Vladimir Putin says that whoever rules AI is going to rule the world. I would change that. If Russia or China rules AI, they will rule their people very effectively because nobody in the country is going to be able to do anything without the leadership knowing about it. But it's not going to rule the world because we're going to get into this competitive situation where they're going to try to deceive our systems. We're going to try to deceive their systems. They're going to try to get their moles into building our code. Hopefully we try to get our moles into building their code. The question is how do we actually verify that the AI systems that we're going to be using has not been spoofed, has not been hacked into? That's a very fertile area for people to start talking about and studying it. Now, when you talk deception programs in Department of Defense, usually they're classified on a high level, so we don't talk it often. But right now in the artificial intelligence field, I think there's an opportunity for that discussion to happen. How will these systems be transparent to us, but not transparent to the enemy? How do we know that the decision aids that they're helping us, the course of action, actually has not been affected by a potential opponent? This is a fertile area. Recently in the MIT technology review of November and December of last year, there was an article called The Fog of AI War. And it talks just about what I'm talking about right now. And also another thing that has not been discussed often in the AI equation, not only the human aspect of it and how humans are going to be using the system, but also the costs involved in the system. AI is not a cost-free endeavor. You're talking about hundreds of thousands of lines of code by professionals, by data scientists, by people. I get the impression that DoD thinks that once we start procuring more and more AI systems, somehow that's going to drive the cost of operations down. I'm not necessarily convinced of that. Yes, you'll be able to cut out some people, but it's not going to be the grand solution. It's not cost-free. I was thinking about it, and I said, you know, if I were an operational commander and I was told I have a certain budget and I can buy two P8s and this exquisite AI command and management program that's going to give them courses of action and advise the commanders and stuff, or I can buy a somewhat good enough AI system, but 12 P8s, I'm going to buy the 12 P8s because they can be in more places at more time. And when you explain that, I have a problem with the dialogue within DoD right now, although Connor says it's changing, and I think he's right. I think a lot of our decision makers don't really understand that AI has its limits as well as its promises. And that's one of the areas that I've been focused on in my research. And people talk about it and they say, well, you know, commercial companies have had great successes with AI and they haven't had to worry about this deception issue. And that's because nobody spoofs Google. When they're collecting your data debris from whatever you're doing online, you don't have a program that adds a few characters to that so that when you're buying baby diapers from Amazon, it doesn't add a few more characters and make the system think you're buying garden gnomes so that they can go to their companies that they help market and say, Mr. or Mrs. or Ms. X buys garden gnomes and stuff. Nobody does that. So they don't have to worry about this deception issue. We, the military, have to worry about that, and we need to worry seriously about it.
Okay. Thank you, Sam. So now that we've heard from our panelists, we wanted to open the floor to you. Please step up to the mic, identify yourself and your organization, and ask whatever question you have. You can address your question to an individual panelist or to the panel in general, and in that case, we'll try to figure out who's best equipped to answer it. And as a courtesy to others asking questions, because we anticipated a number of questions, would you please ask just one one-part question, and I suspect our panelists would most enjoy responding to questions as opposed to listening to manifestos. So, yes, sir, thanks for stepping up.
Okay, I just written down my manifesto, too, so that's a bummer. All right, so I noticed that there's no Marine Corps presence up there, which goes to show what we're doing and how ready we are. But Scott Kinner from the Marine Corps Tactics and Operations Group. I heard what you had to say about humans and everything, but from my perspective, I like the panel's discussion about where we are on data. I work in the ground combat world in the Marine Corps, and our data is, it's just so bad. I can't even come up with polite words to describe where our data currently is. So my senior leaders believe that we're going to be doing AI, and I just, no, you're not, because we have no data, and there's no data culture, at least in my world. So discuss. Thank you.
Yeah. Carter, would you like to start off with that, and then Sam?
Yeah, absolutely. So that was probably, that's critically important. So data is essential to artificial intelligence. So, so you're right. I think for some problems we don't have the data. For other problems, maybe we do, but we can't access it. So one of the first questions I like to ask when somebody says they're interested in artificial intelligence is, okay, where's your data? Where can you get it? And a lot of the times they say, well, no, we don't have any, and then it's, well, then what are we talking about? There's nothing to do. So, yeah, for these, for artificial intelligence applications, data is the fuel. It's, you have dirty data, and you're putting it into a AI algorithm. Your prediction is probably not going to be reliable to the extent you want. Maybe it is. Maybe you don't need that accurate a prediction. Now, I will say one thing that's critically important. A lot of times I think senior leaders think they need more data than they actually do, and this isn't necessarily a machine learning problem, but if the level of uncertainty in the problem is very great, then the amount of data necessary to get insight can actually be very low. So to me, it's about the right data. A good example of that is, compare something like, what's a good AI application where you have lots of data that's available? Well, predictive maintenance, right? We're going after that low-hanging fruit right now where we're saying we're going to instrument up all these aircraft and we're going to get predictive data, we're going to figure out what's going to break. Is that going to work for a missile test? I would argue no. I would argue that there's no way to get good data for a missile test other than maybe testing those missiles in the environment in which they're going to be used. So I think we have to be very careful. I think the first question needs to be, do we have the data? But that being said, I don't think it's an insurmountable challenge for the DoD.
George, can I chime in? There is a little bit of marine content because both George and I commanded amphibious warships, so we dealt with a lot of Marines. If you don't have data, you don't need AI. Simple. That's simple. And the problem that Connor is talking about, say, in maintenance, for example, surface ship maintenance, a colleague has taken a look at that and said, the data cannot be correlated. It's not related because it was taken by different systems using different software, using different values, using different categories, and to put it together and label it will take more effort than actually starting fresh. And that's really the big problem is that we've been collecting data. But we've been collecting, I'm talking about DoD, we've been collecting data in a stovepiped way, and AI is all about relating data collected from different systems. And if this data has been collected with a different value system, or, how do you get to relate it? That's when you hire the data scientists to do that, but if you have so many sources of data that aren't correlated, can't be correlated, then the AI algorithm isn't going to be effective.
Okay, do you want to jump in on this, Jamie?
Yeah, I absolutely agree. The way I think about it is data is the lifeblood for AI. If you don't have data, you don't have AI. Exactly what you're saying. So I know that this is a topic. There was already a data curation panel this morning, and I know that us in the warfare centers, we're trying to tackle that problem the best we can from at least initially a grassroots effort, because it is the data scientists that are looking for the data and trying to figure out, what are the best problems to tackle in order to get to that point of organization, because there are a lot of priorities and everybody wants AI right now, but they don't really know why, and they don't really know how, and they don't really know if it's the right thing to do. So I think the data is really going to be the key to that, to know if we have the right information to turn that information into something valuable for the warfighter.
Could I do one more?
Sure, you can pile on. Go ahead.
So one more thing that just jumped into my head as well is, in my articles, I made the argument that the Navy needs to own its own data. We can't give it away to companies, and the reason for that is if private companies own the Navy's data, then we're going to be captured. It's going to be impossible to switch providers. So as far as companies providing algorithms, I think that sort of thing can be proprietary, but the Navy's got to maintain ownership of its own data, or we're going to be in a really bad place in a couple of years.
Okay, thanks, Connor. While we're waiting for the next, go ahead, please.
Hi, my name is Amelia Krisinovich. I'm with NIWC Pacific, and my background is, once again, human factors, so I'm thinking about human-machine teaming. How do you guys ensure that the operator has trust in the AI and the information that's being fed back to them?
Okay. You want to start that one?
Thanks, Amelia. It's a tough question. So this concept of trust, a lot of people say that word. A lot of people mean different things with that word, and a lot of people think it's measurable and quantifiable in an easy way. But it is a social construct that's really hard to tackle. So there are a few ways that we do it through behavior. So the easiest way to look at trust is use, misuse, or disuse of an autonomy. So that is the first layer. Are they using it right or not using it right? That's an important key to knowing whether or not there's trust in the system. But we're trying to get beyond that, because if they just take an AI or whatever, an autonomous system out in the field, and they don't use it, that doesn't help, right? So how do we make sure that they use it effectively? And I think that we're at the point where we're starting to measure different types of indicators of trust. So you can think of it as a rise in, for example, stress level when they're interacting with an AI. So can we look at heart rate? Can we look at pressure? Can we look at other types of behavioral measures, and also context on top of that, to know whether or not the person believes that the system is doing the right thing? And then also on top of that, look at the system as a whole to understand if the human-machine team together is heading in the right direction. So I think you need both of those elements in order to kind of understand trust in the system. I can go on forever, but I think maybe a pilot would have a good understanding of this too, since that's kind of where I would go. There's obviously an important trust in a system when you are holding your life in its hands. So I think we can take a lot of lessons from that community and be able to apply that more broadly to AI in terms of making sure we know how people are feeling about their interaction with the system, and know exactly the time and offer feedback when that connection isn't what it's supposed to be.
Connor, do you want to jump in, or?
Yeah, absolutely, sir. So, I have some strong opinions on this. So, I think too much trust is really dangerous. Too little trust is also really dangerous if you're going to go too slow. So, the National Security Commission on Artificial Intelligence just released their 5 principles, which were adopted by the Defense Department on February 24th. So that's governable, equitable, traceable, reliable, and responsible. And I think what's interesting there is responsible. So my big question there is who's going to trust? How do you get to trust something, right? Well, traditionally, the military has, for systems that are complicated and dangerous, we have trained people to a very high level. And I think the best analogy for that, as it relates to artificial intelligence, is nuclear power, right? So Hyman Rickover's nuclear propulsion success that he had, and so now we have the nuclear power pipeline, which trains people on how to operate nuclear reactors very safely. Well, a nuclear reactor is very similar to artificial intelligence in that both are enabling technologies, right? So artificial intelligence is not a weapon system, but like electricity or a nuclear propulsion plant, these things are going to be a part of all our different systems. So I would say that education and training are going to be critical to maintain trust. And then on top of that, so the thing about artificial intelligence is ethics can be coded, but one of the things I like about that principle of responsibility as well, or responsible as well, is that AI systems can be responsible for tasks, but they cannot be accountable for the consequences of their own actions, right? So that to me says which human is going to be accountable for this. And my big thing with trust is not that the operator is going to trust it or not, it's that the public is going to trust it or not, because these automated systems can act away from human operators in time and distance the same way that land mines or naval mines can operate. And I think bad actors could use that to make the public have a real issue with artificial intelligence, and I think we've already seen a little bit of that.
Just like nuclear weapons, the phrase should be trust but verify. If I'm an operational commander, first thing that I should think of before using any AI systems to give me courses of action, the first thing I think of is what course of action am I going to take if the system doesn't work? That's the first thing I think of. Then the trusting the courses of action that recommends will only occur if I've trained on it, and it has demonstrated to me that it has been a useful tool. You just can't put it to sea and say, here's your solution, if, in fact, the people involved in the crew or whomever have not used that system again and again. And what I have found throughout my career on the very high-tech, valuable systems, particularly if they're kind of classified systems, as AI might be, is you get it put on your ship just before the deployment, and nobody really knows how well it works. And so you can't trust but verify because you haven't verified it. And then you're expected to produce optimal results. And so this whole field of human interaction, training is going to be a key element of that. I mean, not just training on, here's the algorithm, here's the data. It's taking it to see if it's a system that is, say, giving courses of action, which is what the Navy CIO talked about yesterday at his talk. If you're going to do that, there's a lot to it.
I'd like to pile on, if it's okay, and thanks for raising the question about trust, and I'd like to come at it a little bit different way, piling on to what Dr. Lukos said about man-machine interface. So who's seen the movie The Manchurian Candidate, either the old one or the newer one? Okay, most of you. Who remembers the term ascribed to that gentleman, whether it was Denzel Washington or Frank Sinatra, when they came back to the United States? They had been what? Anyone remember? Brainwashed. Okay. So without sounding like a heretic, I think the thing that I worry about and that Sam and I talk about in the book is that the operator has too much trust. And we can give you example after example of how whether it's at Amazon or whether it's at Uber or Lyft or MetLife, the human's boss is a robot. And that's who supervises the person. But to give you a more concrete example that all of you probably experience, if you go through a McDonald's drive-thru now, at certain sites they're beta testing a system where they take a picture of your license plate. And they also record what you've ordered. And the next time you come through and they take that picture of your license plate, they flash up in the upper left-hand corner of the board what you ordered last time for two reasons. If you ordered a Big Mac, they won't just put a Big Mac. What will they put? The whole meal deal. And they also realize that it will keep the queue moving because other AI has shown them that the people will balk at getting in the line. So our concern is that remember that people in the military today are coming from this experience that they will trust that black box unquestionably, and then that's, we're courting disaster. But thanks for that question.
George, can I add one more thing? And this is just advice to industry. This photograph of the license plate, the EU will ban that in about 5 or 10 years. The EU right now has this great privacy, European Union Commission has this great privacy issue. And what we will find in a few years, you have to be aware of this, is there's going to be a movement to either pay the state of California for every picture you take of a license plate like that, or pay the person who was online for the data that they left online. It's going to happen because this privacy issue is going to be a very big issue, particularly in Europe right now, and then perhaps the U.S., maybe less so the U.S.
Yes, sir.
Hi, I'm Mike Gruss with C4ISRNet. I wanted to ask about a disconnect I'm hearing a little bit about. We heard from the Navy CIO yesterday, and it was a pretty unsparing critique of Navy IT and systems. And so I wanted to ask about if the Navy has the IT and infrastructure it needs to actually apply AI in a meaningful way, and if not, what are the steps maybe the Department of Navy at large needs to take to have the infrastructure that's necessary?
Jamie, do you want to start it off? Or?
Sure. Yeah, it's a sore point, I would say, for the DoD at large. Our IT networks aren't up to snuff in a lot of ways. But that's part of security, and the scientists and engineers kind of realize that there are some extra hoops that we have to jump through as data analysts, as machine learning experts, because of our environment. So partially it's self-inflicted, and we are working on trying to mitigate a lot of those issues, both from a big Navy perspective, but also from our, again, more grassroots effort. How do we circumvent some of the policies that don't really apply to the scientists and engineers that are developing? So how do we build our own networks that sort of are just on the side of the bigger ones? That, I think, is critical, and the only reason that we have a lot of and can maintain a lot of the talented people that we have is because we are able to work with other networks, be able to collaborate with industry and academia in ways that kind of circumvent some of our systems, and obviously in a way that's good and legal. But yeah, I think your point is really valid, that it can cause a lot of roadblocks, that especially in terms of, like we talked about before, getting the data, being able to share the data, being able to curate the data. Those are issues that we run across every day that we need to be able to tackle. But there's a lot of from the perspective of research, pet problems that we can use, or problems that are not necessarily at a secret level, that can be our test cases to be able to explore algorithm development, explore the way we use data, and the way we can add transparency to our systems and to our interfaces. So absolutely not. I take your point, and I understand, but we are doing our best to kind of, again, get away from a lot of that. But when it comes to transition, now you're talking a whole nother game. So I'm going to let someone who knows about that more speak to the actually transitioning it to the warfighter.
Navy staff perspective?
So our systems certainly are not currently set up to employ artificial intelligence to its fullest potential, but I wouldn't say it has to be. I think it can be adopted incrementally, and what I mean by that is a lot of the let's take the automated pattern recognition, image recognition, that sort of thing. What's the advantage there? Well, it allows you to parameterize these things that required enormous amounts of data and human processing previously, right? So the advantage there is if we can use that and we can put that on the sensors, whatever they are, now you're taking these systems which transmitted enormous amounts of data previously, and most of that data was useless. I mean, think streaming video or something like that. Well, I don't care about getting terabytes of streaming video. What I want to know is what I'm interested in, where it is, and what I can do with it. And that's kilobytes of information. So what I would recommend for industry, I think the future in terms of artificial intelligence is not high bandwidth disconnected systems, but we need to start going toward connected systems potentially at the expense of bandwidth. Because I think as we use these AI systems to full effect, it's really going to provide a huge advantage in that sense.
The military, the Navy, Department of Defense will never have good IT systems because of the acquisition of our acquisition requirements. We will always be behind the curve in technology because we've designed a system to be fair. So if you lose an award, you can tie it up in the legal system so that nothing gets done. I'm not talking about any particular companies now, mind you, but if the system is designed to prevent the government from getting ripped off, not designed to get optimum system into the government's hands. And until we change that whole mindset, we will always be we will never have optimal systems. So what you have to do is you have to do what Connor is suggesting, the incremental. And I was particularly taken by what Jamie was saying about having to circumvent existing systems. You know, we're spending time doing that. But on the other hand, there's something good about that because in the history of military innovation, it's always happened where a group has tried to use existing systems in a way that the designers never thought it would be used. You know, so that can spark innovation in its own way. If we have a system that doesn't work well, we have a lot of smart people out there, operators, who over time will figure out how to use it for something it was never designed to do. And then, so over the long run, maybe over 50, 60, 70 years, maybe the way we do things is good. But if you're talking about the 5-year defense plan, well, no.
Please.
Hello, my name is Isabella, and I'm from Army Cyber Command. And my question is, do you think that DoD organizations are working together on AI with organizations like Jake, or do you think that it's getting stovepiped and done primarily in-house?
Sam, you want to start that off? Because you met with General Shanahan a couple of months ago.
There is a social issue with that, too. Do they work closely together? No, but I hope that at the level of cybercom, all those problems and the disconnects get worked out. That's what the whole joint system was all about. Work not just making everybody an expert in somebody else's service, but to get where the disconnects are and work the disconnects. Each of the different cyber commands have a different focus. It's different to try to protect the systems that they ship at sea than it is units on land. So they have different focus. And hopefully the joint system is the one that works it out. Now, the social aspect is this. We are all competitive people in the sense that most of the people here, I could already tell, are type A personalities. In the military, you got a lot of type A personalities. And everybody, as naval officers would know, would like to get the good fit rep bullet. You know, everybody wants to be the person who controls the success. And that's a social aspect that I don't know if we could go. I mean, would the Navy want a Army officer as the ruler of cyber? No. Why? Because there's a whole bunch of Navy officers that would like to be the ruler of cyber. So there's the social aspect that we kind of discount. We pretend we're not human beings, but we are human beings.
No, thank you, Sam. If you want to go?
Can I?
Yes.
Okay, actually, two things. One is we're trying for sure. So just a shout out to NIWC PAC's Naval, last week, Naval Applications of Machine Learning workshop was just last week, and it's bigger and bigger every year. So again, from the scientists and engineers perspective, we're definitely trying to work together, trying to figure out what's going on. And it's broader than the Navy now. We're thinking about changing the name, so it's DoD-wide. So I think there's definitely an attempt to do that, but at the same time, it's so broad-reaching. It's not like a single platform that you can focus on. It's not tangible like a ship or an airplane or a tank or something like that. It's similar to cyber, where it's never going to be completely organized. It's just the nature of the beast in a lot of ways that we just cannot expect to all be on the same page. They don't do that in academia when they're researching new things, and the expectation that we can do that in any domain, I think, is just hard to really believe. So in some respects, we just have to accept the fact that we're all going to be working on different things, and we're all trying to, yes, get AI to the next level, but it's going to be a little bit hybrid, a little bit dysfunctional even in a lot of ways in our ways to get there.
Okay, thank you, Jamie. I have one save round, a question for all our panelists. There are an awful lot of companies here, Steampunk and others, who have AI solutions, and I'd like each of the panelists to address, Jamie from the R&D perspective, and Connor from the requirements, and Sam from the strategic level. What on-ramps do you see for industry to offer their AI solutions? You can go first, or Connor, you want to start it off from a requirements perspective?
I mean, not getting into specifics, but I'd say, reaching out to the JAIC or DIU, these organizations are definitely the touch points to if you're a commercial company and you're interested in partnering with DoD.
And the JAIC's going to have an AI conference at the end of April, so you can find that on their website. Sam?
First, again, what I talked about earlier, I would want companies to start thinking about how they are going to protect DoD from the deception issues that potential, if we rely on AI systems for courses of action and recommendation, again, start thinking in those terms. And George, I'm going to go way out on a limb to advise individuals here who are real, cyber people who are not in uniform, since, well, I'm not in uniform right now, but who can't do these sorts of things, and it's kind of an Alfred Thayer Mahan comic book hero. White hat hackers. We need, in this coming competition between the U.S., People's Republic of China, Chinese Communist Party, and Russia, we need to develop a white hat hacker militia to help us out. So, I mean, this is Sam Tancredi, not official word. What I say has no relationship to what the Department of Defense would advise. But if you're a cyber person, start thinking about that.
So I would say from a researcher's perspective, don't try to sell me your AI and say that it's going to solve my problems, because I know when I hear that you don't understand the problem. So I think that there's a lot of conversation that needs to happen to know to know what the problem really is, and to be able to see if your tool or your concept or your algorithm can actually solve it, because that's sort of my initial reaction to when people come and try to sell their tools is, you haven't seen my data. And again, it all comes back to the data. So I would approach it from a more curious perspective, a more collaborative perspective, and less a sales type of perspective. That's how, from my viewpoint, working with the researchers and working with the actual end users, that's going to be a more viable way of working together.
Yeah,
Okay, go ahead. Yep.
Yeah, I completely agree with that. I think one of the lowest hanging pieces of fruit in the Defense Department is processes that have evolved over years and years where we're just doing the same thing again and again. So automating those processes and speeding them up, that's low-hanging fruit, and there's enormous value in there. So if you come in and say, what are you spending a lot of time doing that's repetitive, I'm certain there'd be work there, because we do a lot of those things.
Okay, thanks, Connor. Ward's given us the hook here pretty soon, so please join me in thanking our panel for their remarks today.
And before we close, I'll just note that the Naval Institute's fall panel was an AI conference at the Naval Academy, and one of the panelists, Missy Cummings, who I don't know, Dr. Luke, if you know Missy, so she was sort of not very sanguine on AI, and so she said in the sort of vox populi, there's a confusion between really sophisticated algorithms and straight stick AI. And so while we talk about AI is coming, she was not thinking it was coming very soon, which I thought was an interesting approach. So thanks to the panel here. Please, again, a round of applause for these folks. And we have the home version of the panel here to give to them. Actually, it's one of our books, Chinese Communist Espionage by Peter Mattis and Matt Brazil, who we had on the podcast a few weeks ago. So thanks a lot, everybody. If you would, in the West app, please fill out the review of this panel. So through AI, we can make the panels better and better every year. That was a joke. All right. Thanks, everybody.
I hope the AI likes it. These are the jokes. Explains why we need white hat hackers.
Thank you, man.